Welcome to the Electric Palace. Thank you all for coming out this very wet evening to an incredibly exciting event. I'm Chris Chibnall. I'm the author of Broadchurch. My debut novel, Death at the White Hart, was published earlier this year. I will be your host for tonight. Here's how the evening will go. We're going to chat for about 45 minutes. Then there'll be a chance for you to ask some questions, after which Mick will be signing some books. Now, if this festival is Bridport's own literate Glastonbury, complete with the weather this evening, then this is the headline act on the Pyramid stage on Friday night. So well done for being here. Our guest tonight, close your ears, Mick, this might take a while, is the author of, I think, 17 novels, 4 novellas, numerous short stories. He sold more than 4 million books and counting. The Apple TV adaptation of his Slow Horses series of novels has just ended its triumphant 5th season, and the adaptation of his novel, Down Cemetery Road, starring Emma Thompson and Ruth Wilson, is currently running to great acclaim. He's won multiple awards, including earlier this year the Crime Writers Association prestigious Diamond Dagger. He'd already won Gold and Steel Daggers, which is awarded to authors who have made an outstanding lifetime contribution to the genre. He was made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 2024, and his latest novel, Clowntown, is now out and is the most wonderful tour de force of humour, tension, storytelling, and rug pulls. He's quite simply one of the finest writers in Britain today. Please welcome Mr. Mick Herron. I'm sorry.
I should probably leave now. It's always going to be downhill.
Well, listen, welcome back to Bridport, Mick, because you've been here before. I want to start by talking about this magnificent book, which I adored, as I've already told you. It's an amazing addition to an already brilliant series. Now, the Slough House series of novels contains a multitude of tones and flavours. They're spy novels, workplace novels, thrillers, comedies. As I've been reading and researching for this, everybody else encapsulates them, everybody else describes them. How do you describe this set of novels and stories?
That's a very good question. I've got no idea. I've never really thought about it, to be honest.
Oh, maybe you don't have to.
As with genre, I think it's one of those things that other people decide what it is.
Yes.
I write the books that I'm able to write. And like most novelists, I think I start with character, and I'm interested in the characters I'm writing about. I've always been a thriller writer, and that's largely because writing a thriller imposes a certain structure, particularly an ending. You really need an ending when you're writing a thriller. In the years before I started, certainly before I was published, and when I was still learning the ropes, as it were, I did write one book that was not thriller genre. It was, well, I suppose you call it mainstream lit, I suppose. And that book is probably still writing itself in a drawer somewhere. It just went on and on and on, and I had no way of bringing it to a close. So that experience taught me that you really have to stick to something that comes with scaffolding.
Yes, yes. And then, so let's talk about Clowntown.
Sure.
And I really don't want to give any spoilers away tonight because it's full of incredible plot twists.
Loads of people die in this one.
Oh, there's some really good deaths in this. What was the starting point for this novel? Was it a particular idea or image, or was there something that kicked you off on it?
Yeah, there were two starting points, so two separate plot strands. They come together quite quickly. And one is to do with the characters. I've done this in the past. When finishing a book, getting to the end of a book, I put something in that I think, I'll come back to that. It's not quite a cliffhanger, but it's something left unresolved. And a couple of books ago, I did this with the character River Cartwright when he's in his grandfather's library. And he takes a little video film with his telephone Telephones can take little films now. Did you know that? Mine can't, but I researched this. It is possible to do it. And he takes a film of his grandfather's library, largely because he wants to film the person who's in the library with him. And I knew when I did that, and that was several books ago, right at the end of that particular book, that I was going to come back to that I was going to use that film. I didn't know how. When I do something like that, it's because I think, okay, next novel, that's going to give me something to think about, something to get me jump-started, as it were. As it happens, it was several novels later that I picked up on this. What's happened at the beginning of Clowntown is that his grandfather's library, his grandfather is dead at the point he takes that film, has been left to the Spies College, which is an actual Oxford college. I'm not going to tell you which one. Oh, St Anthony's.
Okay, great.
And when the books are received there, the librarian decides to shelve them in exactly the same order that they are, that David Cartwright, the old spook, himself had them. There's some kind of feeling that maybe he had some kind of hidden code in the way he shelved the books. And they used the film that River took to show them where all the books went. And the librarian realizes that there's a book missing. And not only is the book missing, they can read the title from the spine. The book doesn't actually exist. It's not a real book. And River, who at this point is not yet fit for service, he's still suffering from an event several books ago, is still on extended sick leave, really. And he decides to find out what this was all about, what happened to that book, what it was really. And the other starting point was a few years ago, must be 3.5 years ago, something like that. I met a man who had been a very senior civil servant, and he was the liaison person between the heads of MI5, MI6 and Downing Street, so he knew a thing or two. And I asked him, this was at a dinner party, it's purely a social event, I asked him what, in his opinion, was the worst thing that the intelligence service had ever been involved in, and without hesitation he said steak knife. Steak knife was the code name, I'm sure you were all aware of this, for an operation that was carried out in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Steak knife was a code name assigned to an IRA enforcer who was a murderer, a torturer, a rapist. Thoroughly nasty piece of work. He was also an informer for the intelligence services. So he was essentially under the protection of British security. And when the Good Friday Agreement arrived, he was taken out of Northern Ireland, given a new identity, and pensioned off, essentially. He was living in Cumbria, I think. And he died a couple of months after I'd had this conversation, a couple of months after I started work on this book. Since then there's been a lot coming to light about him. There's been podcasts about him and books, and there's more coming out. Just a few weeks ago there was a whole cache of emails I think we found concerning him. It's now generally thought that he was responsible for more deaths than lives he saved through his work. It was not a good thing for the intelligence services to be involved in. What I was interested in about this was not in kind of recreating that situation or writing about the tradecraft that went into setting that up. I wondered what it must have been like for the people who were assigned to his case, who were his handlers, who were essentially there to protect him. People who presumably joined the intelligence service and security services, in order to protect the rest of us, in order to do, a good thing. And instead they ended up protecting a man who was essentially a monstrous man. And how that would affect them many years later, when they looked back on their careers and felt that they'd perhaps been sidelined because of that, and defiled in some way, really, by, touching pitch, and suffering in different ways, kind of post-traumatic stress from it, and deciding to seek some kind of reparation for that. And those two plot lines were what I started with, and they come together really quite quickly.
And when you have that, because the novel is so clearly about the convergence of those two ideas, as a fellow writer, I'm always interested in how the processes work for other writers. When you have an idea or two ideas that are starting to converge, how do you then work? At what point do you feel ready to sit down and write, as opposed to construct a plot, or are they simultaneous?
I never really construct the plot, certainly not before I've started work. Probably be sensible to do that, I think, but it's not the approach that I take. The plot is I have those ideas and the kind of general theme of the book, and I have a few ideas of what stations along the way, if you like, and I kind of know how I'm going to end, or at least I know where I'm going to be at the end. And the rest of it, constructing the plot, really happens on a day-to-day basis, really. It happens at the typeface. It's when I can have the journey, if you like, in mind, and I know places that I'm going to visit along the way, but how I get from here to there to there to there, that's all done on the page as I'm writing.
And can you take us into a day in the life of Mick Herron writing? You're in a flat that you have for writing. And how miserable are you? How happy are you? Are you listening to music? What is it?
My daily struggle.
Yeah, I want to hear it. I'm here for it.
I live. I don't work where I live. I write all these books. All the Slow House books, anyway, have been written in the apartment I was living in at the time I started writing Slow Horses. I moved out. I no longer live in the apartment. I moved with my partner when lockdown happened. So, that was one nice thing that happened. That whole, global pandemic. But I still go back to the apartment every day to work. So I'll get up and eventually I'll head out to the apartment. The idea is I work, 9:30 till 4, something like that. And I arrive and I turn my laptop on and then I go and lie down and have a nap. And I put some music on and ideally I'll start work sometime before noon. This sounds awful, isn't it? Anybody watching, if there's any hidden cameras there, would assume that I was some kind of professional time waster who dabbled a little bit in writing fiction. Played a lot of solitaire on the computer. Listened to music. When before I became a full-time writer, I was a commuter. I live in Oxford and I was working in London. And I never used to write on the train because, I don't know about you, but I find writing a very personal kind of thing. I mutter and doesn't go down well in the quiet carriage on Great Western Filling. So I didn't work on the train, but I used to have all that time to think about what I was going to do when I got home in the evening. So there's quite a lot of hours of mulling over during the day, and then I'd get home. I'd have an hour and a quarter in which I had sort of enough energy to write what I had to write for that day, and that was it. Now, none of that time, I have to find my own way of getting that mulling over time. So I'm always working. It just doesn't look like it, that's all. It looks like I'm just hanging around staring at the ceiling. The most important thing to start with is when I open the laptop, I just read the last few sentences that I wrote yesterday. And as soon as that happens, it's like flicking a switch. And it's not immediate, but I know that within the next hour or so, I'll be reading, and then I'll just put the book aside and get down to it. And I don't sit for very long at any given time. It's in bursts throughout the day. Yeah. And words get written. At that time when I was commuting, 350 words was what I aimed to produce in an evening. And now, at the moment, 500 words in a working day seems quite enough. It's hard, my life. It really is. There's a lot of snacking goes on as well.
Thank you very much for that insight. I think that's very good. So can I take you back? I want to sort of decrypt the influences that have made you the writer you are. So you grew up one of 6 children?
That's right, yeah.
This is basically where we go a little bit Eamon Andrews, and this is your life.
Mm-hmm.
You were living above your dad's optician's shop in Chibnall Road?
Until I was 8, that's where we lived.
Sharing a bedroom. 2 of your brothers?
Yes, I was in a bunk bed. There were 3 beds in that room. Yeah.
Right. And your mum was a nursery teacher?
Yes, yeah.
And she taught you to read before you went to school, is that right?
Yes, that's my memory. I was certainly... When I started at school, yes, my memory of reading at school was always reading solely to the teacher, while other groups were doing reading lessons, because I was already ahead of where I would have been at that stage. Yeah.
And so what are those first books that you're reading? What are the books that live in you from those?
Crime and Punishment was what I started.
Yeah.
For usual stuff, Janet and John.
Yeah.
Dick and Dora.
Yeah.
I remember, did anybody else read Dick and Dora books? I'm not making them up, am I? Yeah. I remember doing that at a Q&A for an American newspaper, and it was not known over there. I had to say, do not Google this.
Yes, quite right.
Yeah. And then, I read everything as soon as I could, really. I was, and still am, a great user of public library system, which is one of the great cornerstones of British civilization, really, the public library system that we have. There was no way we could have afforded to buy all the books I needed to read at that time, because I was just an addict. Still am, but less voracious than I used to be then. If you're going to be a writer, reading from a very early age is a really hugely important part of it. And I was a narrative junkie. I just wanted stories all the time.
Well, that's interesting, because that very much comes across in that's the hit I get from reading your novels as well, that sense of narrative addiction as well, and wanting to know.
I think that's something else that comes along with genre. I mean, you do have to provide a lot of sort of punches along the way.
Yeah.
And that provides the kind of dopamine hit that reading fiction gives you.
Yes. And then, so when you were a teenager and heading towards university, you read English at Oxford,
Yeah.
right? And what were you wanting to be at that point?
I had no idea what I was going to be. I never really thought about the future very much. I was just interested in reading books and not very much else at the time. And that went on until I was about, 45, I think. And then I thought, no, maybe I could make a career out of this. Yeah.
And you began writing, and you as a poet. Is this right?
I wrote verse before. Well, when I was not again. I had a chair collapse on me at an event not long ago. It was live streamed. Maybe some of you saw it. Oh. Where were we? Yes, writing. I wrote stories as a teenager. I think many people, when they're growing up, we're all creative when we're young, I think, and find different ways of expressing that. And for many people, writing is part of it. The sad thing is that many people stop, usually around mid-teens, when sex and drugs and rock and roll become, sort of alternative pastimes. But I took it up again after a few years, once the sex and drugs and rock and roll had started to fall. But when I did, I was writing verse. I wrote poetry for many years, 3 or 4. And then that sort of stopped for me. So I then started writing prose fiction at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in, because your use of single words, your deployment of names for characters, and all the delight that you have in language, I think, I wonder how much that comes from the economy of having started as a poet.
Economy is a really important part of it, and rhythm as well. I think the rhythm is overlooked as an important part of prose fiction. Rhythm lends memorability to prose as much as it does to poetry.
Yes.
You don't want to go tumty-tumty-tum, but there are hidden rhythms in a lot of, particularly in dialogue, and dialogue is intended to move quite swiftly from character to character. The rhythm is a big part of that. And a lot of that comes from movies, really. I mean, the kind of screwball comedy movies of the 1940s, where that rat-a-tat dialogue, that was always fascinating to me. And coming up to more modern times, Aaron Sorkin, The West Wing, I was a huge fan of The West Wing. The way his characters talk to each other, the walk and talk stuff. Yeah. It's always very, very snappy, and the rhythm is a hugely important part of it. And, rhythm comes, for me, and a lot of my use of rhythm came from learning how to write verse.
That's interesting. And then later on, in terms of your journey towards being a writer, so you're then, you become a sub-editor.
That was the job I had when I was commuting. And in fact, for many years before that, I was doing a very similar job only in Oxford. But the commuting part of it coincided with becoming a published writer. The same week that I got, that I was given offered a contract for my first novel, Down Cemetery Road, I also got offered this new job. So life completely changed for me in that week, I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't feel like it immediately, but it certainly did make a big difference.
And do you think that the skills you had as a sub-editor, where you're editing other people's, you're going into material and, again, economy and rhythm?
Absolutely. I think that anybody who is interested in writing prose fiction could do a lot worse than practice being a sub-editor, because a lot of what I was doing was being... And I worked for a research company that published materials on employment issues, and I was in the employment law department. A lot of what I was doing was being given, here's 1,200 words on a particular aspect of employment, or turn it into 800 words without losing any of the information. And that is a hugely useful thing to practice if you're wanting to write prose fiction. But again, it's the economy.
Yes, and you've
Stupid. Sorry, couldn't resist that.
Fine, we're friends. During that period, it's obviously a period where you're wanting to be one thing and having to do another job, where you're writing but also having to do a thing. And how much of that does feed into these characters, or does it not?
When I look back, it's very easy to say that, I think, and I have speculated about it. But the fact was, I was perfectly content at the time. It was a good job. I enjoyed it. I wasn't working in Slough House. The people I worked with were almost entirely very, very nice people. They're all lawyers, so I have to say that. But they're people I got on very well with, and I'm still in touch with now, years later. But it's interesting to take a step back and look at what I was doing, which was saving up all my, the real work for what I was doing in the evening and writing the books, and yet having to spend every day sitting in an office after a long and often tedious journey in and out there, to say, well, that's what I was doing when I made Slough House. I'm just putting myself into that position. I don't think it's real, but it's quite attractive.
It's a good theory.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing when I was a student I would have speculated about. That would have been a good essay, it would have been a good essay. It would have sounded very convincing by the time I got to the end of it.
Excellent. And one of the things I think, because the sense of the spy thriller and your mastery of that form and the genre is so fabulous and acclaimed, often I think what gets a bit undiscussed in your writing is the comic writing and your love of comic language and the joy you take in that as well. Because if I may just want to read one sentence from Clowntown out for the audience, because just in terms of, again, your precision of words, but it's not a spoiler. Lamb was back from his mini break in the lavatory, and Catherine shuddered at the thought of the state he'd have left it in. She'd once put up a sign reading, "Please leave the toilet as you would like to find it," and by the following morning he'd installed a stack of pornographic magazines in a dartboard.
I remember writing that line because I was in the TV production officers, the people who make Slow Horses, and they had that sign up in the loft. I was in the writer's room and I went to the loo and came back laughing. I said, I've just seen the sign and I know exactly what I'm going to do with it.
But when you talk about rhythm and things and just how that plays with an audience as well, you can hear the laugh, which you can't normally do always as a novelist. But were there comic writers that were also an influence on you? Because obviously we have the lineage of Le Carré and Len Deighton and Graham Greene, and but in terms of the comic aspect of your writing, who did you love? And
I guess I would kind of avoid, on the whole, books that don't have any humour in them at all, because they can be quite a struggle to get through. A lot of openly comic writers like P.G. Wodehouse, or a constant joy. I heard a piece of Wodehouse on the radio last week or so, when I was lying in bed in the morning, and it was one of the Jeeves stories was being read out, and there's a telegram arrives for Bertie Wooster from Bingo Little, and the telegraph starts, "Bertie, old man, I say Bertie, stop." And that just made me laugh out loud. Anybody who could do that, yeah, he's a wonderful writer. But more mainstream comic writers, I think one of our finest writers now is Jonathan Coe, who is very much a comic writer. Kingsley Amis. Amos is, I know that he's got a lot of bad press these days, rightly so for some of his attitudes, but he was an extraordinarily comic stylist. And he became it's not often said about him, but his later novels, the style he adopted there was really quite edgy. It was really, nobody else was writing quite like that. And that's always something to pay attention to, I think, the way other writers get humour into their work and the way they express it. But it's also something to be quite wary of. It's when reading very funny writers like Amos or Chris Brookmeyer, who's a wonderful crime writer, but very, very witty. I find if I'm reading their stuff, they can start to influence the way I write, and I don't want that. I have to cross things out when I realise that I'm just channeling Chris or Kingsley Amis. Comic writing tends to weigh more heavily in its influence than most other kinds, I find.
Oh, that's interesting. And comedy, the other side of comedy is sort of rage, in a way. A lot of the novels are a comic howl in some ways and a rage against the world we may be living in right now. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much do you feel that sense of rage has kind of, across the series and as you've been writing the novels, how much has that infiltrated it? And do you feel, is that where you feel you write from a position of, it's low down, but it's very deeply embedded? Quite a lot of it, and it is certainly, a lot of it is venting, yes, anger at the way we're governed, essentially, and have been for decades. But at the same time, the voice that I adopt, the narrative voice in that isn't just me, it's another character, really, the way I express anything that isn't, an actual named individual in there. The narrative voice there is essentially just another construct that I've invented. It's not simply me being me. Yes, and do you have a sense of who that person is? Oh, I wouldn't want to spend much time with him. It's a more cynical voice than I am, I think, or used to be. I think I'm more cynical now than I was when I started writing these books. And that's partly because of what's happened in the country in the past decade and a half, since I started writing them. Yes, and in Clowntown you have a new Prime Minister. Don't we all? And you say that his government had hit the ground runny, like a jelly that hadn't quite set. Yeah. I can't swear that... I started writing this book before... The Tories were still in power when I started writing the book, but I knew that by the time it was published that there'd be a general election and clearly the Labour Party would be in. So I wrote it as if... Knowing that it would be published in September of this year, I wrote it as if the Labour Party had been in power for about 6 months. In fact, as we all know, the election happened about a year earlier than that. My feeling was that... although some of us had been waiting for a change of government for quite a long time, we probably weren't going to be overly delighted when it happened. And you know what? I think I was probably on the money with that one. All hail your prescience. It didn't take a genius, I have to say. And there's a really wonderful sequence between the new Prime Minister and Lady Di of First Desk within the novel, and the way you present that is feels very of now. So it's interesting how you write ahead in that sense. I tend to write about situations that are about, when it's involving the politicians and those people running the intelligence service, that are always discussions essentially about power and who holds the power. And those kind of conversations are presumably happening all the time. They're always going to be current one way or another, whatever the actual subject matter is at hand. I'm sure a lot of discussions like this have been taking place over the Chinese spy trials over the past few weeks now, and there will be something else in a year's time that will be exactly the same kind of conversation about something slightly different. No matter who is in charge, the issues of how power is wielded and how ethically or unethically that happens, it's always going to be contemporary. It's always going to be current. Yes, and I wonder, you've always said that you don't research this, you haven't got the inside information in terms of the spy world, and how much has that, with the success of the novels and now obviously the TV series as well, how much has that been, have you been able to keep that wall, or are people now more going, I'll tell you something, Mick? You know?
I don't get the I'll tell you something, but I have met people, again, always socially.
Yeah.
I have met several people who hold offices that I write about in here. They're all much nicer than the people I invent, I have to say. But then they'd have to be, really. The books and the characters in the book, I'm interested in them as an expression of your worldview, because you're a very funny writer, you have a real engagement with the world. Are the books about the hope of redemption in a world that keeps denying them redemption? I was always very clear right from the start that none of these characters are going to achieve the redemption that they seek.
Yeah.
None of them are ever going to be taken out of Slough House and put back in the position they were in before everything went wrong for them. And I was very, very clear on that. But they still haven't got the message, most of them. In this book, it is starting to hit home. A couple of the characters are thinking about, this has been going on too long, I have to really think about my position. Do I really want to be in Slough House forever?
And you keep bringing in new characters who are also hopeful that they may one day escape Slough House or
again, they get told right at the beginning that that's not going to happen, but they do still tend to believe that.
How much do when you were writing, you said you understand where you're going, but a lot of it can be a surprise as well. How much do those characters continue to surprise you as you get to a ninth novel, in a series?
I'm always averse to saying that characters take over in any sense. When I hear a writer say that, I know that what they mean is something a little bit different, but that's the easiest way of expressing it, perhaps. What I think is that characters won't demand, they make their own demands on the writer at all, but if you're writing about a character that you've been writing about for 6 books, say, you can't make that character do something that they clearly wouldn't do given what you've written about them. Yeah. So there are things you can't make characters do, and there are things you can't make characters say. But they don't surprise me, generally. It would make life easier if they did, in many ways. They could do the work, and I could just carry on with my power napping. That would be really excellent. But I do think that when I'm inventing characters, when I'm bringing in a new character, I don't really know what they're like or what they're capable of being like until they're on the page and talking to other characters. Dialogue is where character starts to come to life, I think, interacting with the other characters that are there. That's the bit that I enjoy most, having the dialogue, writing the dialogue, really. I mean, your day job is the best one, isn't it? Because you skip all the boring bits, you just write the dialogue when you're working for TV. But that is, in itself, I mean, that's also slightly dangerous because you can get carried away. I end up writing sort of pages and pages and realising, actually, I've got to get this down to half a page because nobody wants to read 4 pages of these characters just snarking at each other all the time. Do you? Do you want that?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Pretty unanimous.
Forget about the editing there.
Do you? Are you sometimes at home disgusted with what Jackson Lamb has just said?
I am occasionally horrified at what I come up with. I have to say, particularly because my mum reads these books, and yet she seems to be okay with it on the whole.
Do you go through her copy, scrawling things out?
It never occurred to me to do that, but maybe I should.
And let's talk about the TV adaptation, which has obviously been a massive success. You're on 5th season already, acclaimed around the world, incredible cast. How has that... first of all, how much have you enjoyed that process of both the show being made and then going into the world? How has that been for you as the writer of the novels?
It's been great. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. But partly that is because I'd always known at the back of my mind, if this all goes wrong, it's got nothing to do with me, mate. That was other people did it. But at the same time, I don't take a huge amount of credit for what they've done with the TV show because I'm talking to you about this. The number of people it takes to make something that is up there on the screen is just phenomenal. When I visit the set, it's like visiting a small town. There are hundreds of people there. They're all doing absolutely crucial things. I've got no idea what any of them are, but clearly they're making, they're turning money into light, as it were, putting it all up on the screen. I just sit by myself in a room, and if my laptop breaks, I've got a pencil and a piece of paper. I can do it really low key.
Yeah.
And this is something entirely different. But I have been extremely fortunate particularly in the casting, as you say, but in the entire crew of people who've come together to do these shows, because they said right from the start what they wanted to do was get the tone and the mood of the books and put it up on the screen. They wanted the characters to be as they are in the book and put them there. And I think they've done that. I mean, physically, many of the actors, the cast, don't resemble the way I will have described them, but that doesn't matter to me in the slightest. Apart from anything else, if I don't really have visual images of my characters, I will put a description in because that's the convention. But if I have to remind readers of what the people look like, I have to go back and find the original description so that I remind myself. Because I have their voices in my head, but I don't have pictures at all. So what they've done, the TV guys who've done with this, is put those people up there. They've kept those characters intact, regardless of what they might look like, and it's fantastic, because I know a lot of writers who've had very heartbreaking encounters with television, either because their books have been completely travestied in their view by what TV makers have done to it, or after years and years and years, it's just never reached the screen, despite the amount of effort and rewrites and so on that have gone into attempting to produce television. It's a tricky business. As I say, you know this much better than I do. And I had close encounters prior to that. When it came to Slow Horses being optioned, I'd had my first book, Down Cemetery Road, had been optioned twice. It had gone through 2 stages and not got anywhere either time. So when Slow Horses, when an offer was made for it, I just said, yeah, fine. I thought, this isn't going to happen, but I'm perfectly happy to take your money and watch you making fools of yourself for the next couple of years. And it was 8 years between that first meeting and the thing hitting the screen. And for the first 4 or 5 years of that, I thought, yeah, this isn't going to happen. And I just ignored it. I carried on with the books, and that was all just bubbling away in the background. The last 3 years of that process, it was clear that it was happening. But by then, I knew the people doing it. I knew the producers. I knew Will Smith, who was the lead writer. I completely trusted their judgment, and I knew that they were attempting to be true to the books, far truer than I would have required or expected. And when I first saw it on screen, I was blown away. I thought, this is great. So yeah, I will take all the credit for it. That seems fair.
And does the show bleed into? Are you able to keep the 2 versions of things separate?
Yes, I am. And I do think that they're parting ways. And I've already started doing that, and we'll probably do that a bit more, for all sorts of reasons. All of which are perfectly understandable and necessary. But my view is that I will just continue writing the books that I write. And I don't write with an eye on the screen. I don't think, what do they want to do with these, who do they want me to highlight or anything. I just write the books as I need to write them, and that will always continue, I hope.
And so it doesn't make it harder to, for example, kill a character in a book if you now know the actor who's playing?
Turns out it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. I do remember the first book that... this is the first novel that I've written in its entirety since the TV show landed. I was writing bad actors at the time that I first started visiting the set, and it was all taking off. And I remember telling Gary Oldman that the new book was called Bad Actors. That was a nervous moment, I have to say. My partner Joe took photographs. We've got a section of photographs of me talking to Gary, and he's roaring with laughter. It all worked out nicely.
That's great. And so, how far ahead are you planned? I'm thinking about the future of this. Are we allowed to call it a universe, Mick? The Herronverse?
The Herronverse. That came out in an American newspaper last week. That's one of the more embarrassing moments of my life. I'm generally about a page and a half ahead of anybody else, I think, when it comes to my books. Yeah.
But do you have a sense of, I'm not asking for you to reveal any exclusives, but in your head, do you think there's probably X amount of novels left in the series, or is it just an open endeavour?
A bit of both. I mean, I am writing a novel at the moment which is not a Slough House book, and I know that the book after this will be a Slough House book, and I know what it's called, and that's about all I know. After that, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the next 3, maybe even 4 years. So I'm not thinking any further ahead than that. I'm not really thinking further ahead than next Tuesday, to be honest. But I do know that those 2 books are there.
Great, okay. A couple of quick-fire ones, and then let's open it up to questions.
Sure.
Okay, so for you, what's the hardest thing about writing?
The hardest thing about writing? Oh, gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's all... There's joy in every aspect of it for me, but at the same time, there are difficulties. Sometimes it's just starting in the morning, I can be looking forward to it right up to the point where I sort of sit down and have to start doing it, and then I can think of other things that I'd rather be doing. Ending a book is always difficult, not the actual logistical business of tying up loose ends and so on and making sure that you've landed the whole thing, but simply having to say goodbye to that book. There's always... leaves you feeling a little bit bereft, I think. And also there's the fact that once that's done, you've got nothing to do but start another one. So it's like another mountain to scale. Because it's always the same. I mean, it's not like, you said, 17 novels, which I think is right. It's not any easier starting the 18th. It's always, you're always a beginner. You're always a novice. Never written this book before, and therefore it's going to present its own unique kind of difficulties. And even within that, I mean, some books are just harder than others for no apparent reason. The rhythm of writing tends to be a bit like that, anyway. And that's on a kind of macro level as well. Some books, that book was hard to write, one of the most difficult ones that I've written. And I hope that nobody notices that when they're reading it.
Quite the opposite, I would say. It's an incredible read.
Glad to hear it. I mean, but it was a relief rather than an expectation. People thought that it was okay. And I don't know why, particularly, it was more difficult. Possibly because the one before it, The Secret Hours, I had a ball writing that. I had really great fun. And it felt, it's probably not true, but I look back and think, oh yeah, that was a breeze. It wasn't really, but it was, compared to that, it was.
And what's the best thing about writing for you?
The hours are good. I just find that every so often I have to stop and think, I would be doing this anyway, even if I was still working for a living and if the books weren't being published, I would still be doing it because it's how I find fulfillment in myself. So the fact that success has become part of the equation and that, all these you lovely people have turned out to listen to me wittering on like this is fantastic and still barely credible to me. It is quite extraordinary.
Great. Well, on that note, let's open the floor to questions from the entire Electric Palace. Look, all those people, Mick. They all came out for you on a Friday.
Are you here all the time?
Yeah, because of your words. Where shall we start? Okay, we've got one over there.
Hello. Do you think there is a real Slough House above a North London kebab shop in a seedy street with an equally seedy and rude Jackson Lamb running it?
Well, there probably is now, yeah. I gather there are tours. I've never been on one. I do intend to one day. They're running tours around East London, pointing out where Slough House is. And I'm going to disguise myself and join in.
You could run them.
No, this is completely made up by me. But having said that, I've had conversations with people since, and there are analogous situations. I mean, they've both been, the ones I'm thinking of, both happened in the States. Apparently, I was talking to a writer friend who lives in Connecticut, and he was a teacher. And apparently they have what amounts to a Slough House for teachers there. When teachers are really failing in the classrooms, they're assigned to this apartment where they have to turn up, they have to keep to the hours, but they have nothing to do all day. They just turn up, they clock in, they spend all day there, and then they clock out again. And I think that's the dream job, personally. But I can see that it might be a bit draining. But in terms of the spy world, no. As I said, I was working for a research company that researched employment issues. And one of the triggers for writing the series in the first place was, how difficult is it to sack a civil servant? It is very difficult to sack a civil servant. And so that kind of fed into the whole premise. But in fact, that doesn't apply to the security services, rightly so. If you are rubbish at being an intelligence officer, you will be sacked. I have that on the highest authority.
Right, any more questions? One down there.
Mick, you describe a journey of a man commuting from Oxford to London to earn a living, and now your peers, he's sitting opposite you, telling you how fantastic you are. How has success changed you, and how has success changed the way you write and what you write?
To take the second part of that first, I hope that success hasn't changed the way I write. One of the things I'm happiest about in my career was that success happened quite slowly and took a long time to arrive. So by the time it did, I was pretty grounded in the way I write. And certainly not consciously, I haven't changed my approach to writing a book at all. And I hope I won't, because it suits me the way I work. And I've certainly not been asked to, speed up or anything like that, which I would find difficult. So I hope that it hasn't changed my writing practices. Changed me, yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I couldn't have sat here in front of all of you and spoken even more coherently than I am now. I couldn't do any kind of public stuff at all. I was very nervous about it. So I'm a bit more confident on the whole. But by and large, I would like to think that I haven't changed too much, because when you think about the kind of changes that success wreaks upon a character, they tend not to be positive on the whole. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I know that my place in the universe is pretty well established, because I'm sure many of you will understand what I mean when I say this. My partner and I, we have cats. And so long as I'm there when they want to be fed or need to be cuddled, whatever else I do is a matter of absolute indifference to them. Books that are published, reviews, awards, events like this, they just go meh. That is half a meow. I mean, if we had dogs, they'd be absolutely mental by now. They'd be delighted. But cats, no, they keep your feet on the ground. They do.
Very good. More there. Another one over there.
Good evening.
Hey.
I've really enjoyed all your books, and being an occasional drinker and somebody who enjoys a cigarette and the rest of it, I appreciate Jackson Lamb's habits. But I get the impression in the television series there's rather less of the smoking and drinking than I would like to see. I know that Disney have got options on or take on the Bond franchise, and there's issues there about dumbing down or changing the sort of the less nice characteristics of James Bond. To what degree, as a writer, do you have a responsibility to write about those of us who drink and smoke and enjoy life, and make sure that stays alive on our screens?
It's one of the ways that I won't change the writing, certainly, into my characters. And I don't think it's an advert for an admirable lifestyle. I don't think people are reading and saying, "Ooh, that looks like fun, I'm going to do that." But it is true that that Apple, like many other TV companies, have a very strict policies with regard to showing people smoking and drinking as well. Murdering other people, that's funny. But bad language and smoking are really not where we want to go. It's one of those things that causes a certain amount of frustration for certain members of the cast. No names mentioned there. But it's one of the things you have to live with. And, you could say that it's hypocritical. I couldn't possibly comment, obviously. But it's just the way things are. And it is strange, because, as I say, we see these characters doing all sorts of things which you wouldn't want anybody watching to emulate. And, smoking is one of them. But it's probably... I mean, it's obviously smoking is bad for you, but, shooting somebody in the head is bad for them. If you had to decide which one you were going to portray on screen, I would have thought smoking was the kinder option, but no.
For the questions, one at the back over there.
Hello. I first met you about 12 years ago at Sturminster Newton Literary Festival. You had two books, I think possibly three. And you stood up and you told the audience you'd never make any money from writing. Can you actually or say what the trigger was that made you from a very good writer of exciting stories to what I've heard described as a TV phenomenon?
I get told I'm quite prescient sometimes. I obviously missed the ball on that one. You have to be lucky to have a successful career in any of the creative arts. And I got lucky. I mean, I can pinpoint the luck for me. It was the books being found by a particular editor at John Murray, the publisher at John Murray, and having the books published there in 2016. It started 2015. Since then, I've been very well taken care of by publishers since then, and been very lucky with the TV happening at exactly the right time. All of it has been entirely outside of my control. I've just carried on doing what I do all the time, which is exactly what this particular publisher, Mark Richards he was called, told me when he said that he wanted to publish my books in the UK. He said, you just carry on doing what you're doing and I'll do everything else. And like with the TV, I thought, yeah, I'm sure this is not going anywhere, but I'm quite happy to cede that to you. And I completely underestimated him. He really knew what he was doing, and he turned my career around, which is, it's lovely. I'm very, very glad that it did. But it's very difficult to go back and analyse it and see how it happened. I mean, there's all sorts of things that I just never heard about at the time, certainly. A lot of money was spent on this. He organised a giveaway. Slow Horses was given away with the Evening Standard. They gave away 10,000 copies of the novel one day in 2015 at some point. And for years afterwards, I would get approached by people saying, I first came across you when I was given your book at a railway station. So that had a huge impact. And all sorts of things like that, which people often say was word-of-mouth success, but that word of mouth was orchestrated and bankrolled to an extent by some very clever people in publishing who knew that they wanted these books to be a success. So I'm just a very happy beneficiary of all this.
More questions? Anybody else? There was one in the middle there.
Because you're nice that you got as far as you did. Because people can be so horrible, like some of your people in your books. But I find it, and because you keep cats, which is great, I think just because you have a feeling of warmth and approachability and also probably responsibility for what you're writing as well. That must be really difficult to know what you can really want to say and what you can't. But anyway, I think it's probably because you're a nice person.
That's very kind, thank you. Anybody who spends any significant amount of time with me has to sign a non-disclosure agreement about quite how unpleasant I am in private. But I've been getting away with it for quite a while now, so thank you very much.
Another question on that row.
Why is Jackson Lamb in Slough House? What's his screw up?
They ask.
I get asked this a lot. And do you know what? I state it quite clearly in Slow Horses. If you read the last page of Slow Horses, it does say why he's there. It's because he asked for it, really. I mean, sorry, this is a bit of a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read. Can I talk about this? Yeah. We know now at this point that from after the close of Slow Horses, that Jackson Lamb executed essentially Charles Partner, who was the first desk who was a traitor, and for that he was given Slough House. He wanted it. He was essentially given this kind of retirement posting where he would be paid to sit in his office and do bugger all forever after, and that was what he wanted. But it was his payback for killing Charles Partner.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's also because the last lines, and again, the last line of Clown Town as well, is just the way you devastate with a final line or two as well is one of the great joys of reading these books as well, I think. So, yeah, the power of that. Any more questions? Oh, we've got another question down there.
Hiya, Mick. Can I ask how closely involved you were with the actors who were chosen to portray your characters?
I don't have anything to do with casting at all. I've been very, very fortunate. Both series, they have wonderful casts. But that's not something that I have any say in at all. I find out about it at quite an early stage. So, I mean, when Gary was showing interest, everything happens very, very slowly in the television world, I find. So when the announcement was made that Gary was playing Jackson Lamb, I'd known for several months that was the case. And for several months before that, I'd known that he was very interested and they were talking about it. So it all happens very, very slowly. And I've been, hugely fortunate, but I didn't get any nobody was asking me about it. Because these kind of decisions, I mean, the amount of money that's involved is just extraordinary. I'm way, way down on the pay scale as far as that's concerned. I don't get...
Did you have any conversations with Gary when he was thinking about taking the part?
No, I had conversations with him after he'd said he would take the part. The first time I spoke to him, before I met him, we had a phone call, and he... rang. It was a slightly strange conversation because he was in Palm Springs where he lives, so there was that kind of delay on the phone, which is always very awkward if you've ever had one of these transatlantic phone calls. So they leave you a bit on edge. But he said before he took on a role, he always liked to know what the character had in his fridge. And I thought, what a fantastic metaphor that is. That's really lovely. How, to understand how a character really, really operates. It wasn't a metaphor at all. He wanted to know what Jackson Lamb had in his fridge. I never really answered that question. Mostly takeaway cartons, I suspect, and some green milk and that kind of thing.
And does Gary Oldman know anything more about Jackson Lamb than the readers of all the books?
In a way, he does, because Gary has spent more time thinking about Lamb than anybody bar me. Yeah, he can't have spent more time thinking about it than me. But he's also, of course, spent quite a long time thinking about George Smiley when he played, whom he played in the movie of Tinker Tailor some years ago. And he sees, so he's kind of the world authority really on those two characters. He knows more about them than any other individual. And he sees parallels between them, and he thinks of Lamb as being how George Smiley might have been if he'd taken a wrong turning or made a wrong decision earlier in life. I do not think of the characters... I never think of Lamb in relation to Smiley at all. I don't look at it that way. But Gary is entitled to because of the work that he's done. So I always find it interesting to hear him talking about those characters and the thoughts that he has about them. But that's one of the ways in which the TV show and the books are kind of diverging. And it's right that they should do so. I mean, if the TV show is to be its own thing, which it has to be, then it requires that kind of thought and commitment. But it's necessarily going to involve divergence.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid that is all the time we have with Mick for this evening, so only leaves me the opportunity to say thank you to our sponsors this evening, Andrew and Helen Carless. Thank you very much, and thank you to you all for coming out. But most of all, please show your appreciation for Mr. Mick Herron.
Thank you.